Welcome, everybody, to Survive and Thrive, the complete financial framework for modern nonprofits. We're joined today by Infinite Giving, as well as us here at Hiline. And I'm going to turn it over to our CEO and co founder, Matt Gardner, to kick us off this morning.
Okay. First of all, I just want to thank everybody for joining us today. Super grateful. We've got like a great response. We had almost 500 people from almost 50 states register for the event today. So I guess to kind of set the table and kick us off, you can start with the concept of the organizations doing the most good in the world can often be the worst at managing money. And I don't mean that as a dig. I mean that from a place of it doesn't come down to carelessness or not knowing these things are important, but oftentimes, if you're running a nonprofit organization or you sit on the board for a nonprofit organization, you didn't get into it for the finance and accounting that is required to run the organization. You got into it because you have a deep passion for the thing that you do in the mission of your organization. Every hour lost in spreadsheets is an hour stolen from your mission. Every weekend you're buried in grant reports is a weekend you don't spend changing lives. And this is the paradox of purpose-driven work. The more you care about your cause, the less time you actually have to care for the systems that sustain and run it. Just to kind of like paint a picture, I think this is probably going to sound familiar to everybody. Imagine it's nearly midnight on a Sunday. You've got a grant report due by 8 a.m. Monday morning. You've got 8 cups of coffee on the table. You have crumpled receipts in front of you. You have 7 Excel tabs open on your computer. None of them reconcile. Your program director texts you, tells you that they can't find a receipt for a $47,000 expense that you need to submit with your grant report the next day. And it's not a nightmare that's unique to you. It's something that thousands of nonprofits face nearly every single day. And it's interesting to think about, how do we get here? The pressure that puts on an executive director and on a board to have to triage these fires when they start to burn is it's a complete distraction. And it causes the community that you serve to suffer at the same time, because it's less time you have to work on your organization and work in your community. And the answer lies in the paradox itself. And I think the solution is that it starts with one simple truth. And a strong financial foundation enables an unstoppable mission. It's generally not the other way around. And today we're going to show you exactly how to build that and what becomes possible when you do. So before we go deeper, I'd love to introduce our star of nonprofit finance gurus, Matt Gardner, CEO and co-founder of Hiline. And Karen, why don't you kick us off?
Hey everyone, my name is Karen Houghton, and I'm the CEO and co founder of Infinite Giving. And I'm an investment advisor that works really closely with hundreds of nonprofits all over the US on how we think about financial sustainability. And that's receiving complex donations, managing those donations, and growing those donations.
Sarah Serbin.
Perfect. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Serbin. I'm the manager of our nonprofit accounting team here at Highline. Really, my main goal is making sure that we get all of your systems in place, really great processes down. So, like Matt mentioned, your executive director, your directors, and your team can just focus on your mission.
Fun fact about Sarah. Sarah's actually been with us since you 19 when you started working
Yeah,
with
I
us.
think I was about 19. It was 2018, which feels like a decade ago. But yeah, along for the ride. It's been wonderful. And seeing all of our nonprofits grow has been just a huge enjoyment. So,
Yeah, Sarah's a rising star, and she's one of our nonprofit accounting experts at Highline. So thank you, Sarah, for joining today.
of
And
course.
last but not least, Katie Burns.
All right. Great to see all of you today. I'm Katie Burns, Matt's chief of staff. I'm going to help moderate today's session. Prior to this, I did spend a lot of time helping on the accounting side with all of our great customers here at Highline. And I especially love our nonprofit customers because I love their mission driven focus.
All right, are we ready, team?
Let's do it.
We're ready. Okay, so a couple of sections today just to kind of cover the agenda quick. I'm gonna set the table with just kind of the current state of the financial planning crisis I think many nonprofit organizations are facing. Sarah Servin is going to cover setting the foundation for what good looks like. Karen's going to cover adding the growth layer, and Katie is going to take us through integration and implementation and a case study of what this looks like when you do it well. And we're going to try to save time as much time as we can at the end to do kind of a live Q&A session. So right now, Hiline's working with nearly 100 nonprofits right now, and we're talking to them every single day, and we're hearing a lot of the same themes. I think there's a lot of uncertainty. I don't think anybody really knows what to make the economy. There's obviously a lot of policy changes coming through government. I think everybody's kind of in this moment where nobody really knows what's going to happen next. And it's kind of a perfect storm of four converging crises that are pushing nonprofits to their breaking point in many cases. Many are reporting expenses are rising faster than funding. 86% of nonprofits are being affected by inflation. Primary revenue sources are disappearing, 84% expecting that some form of their current funding is going to be cut or disappear. There's more need and less resources. 85% expect an increase in demand for services in their communities. I think the stress that nonprofits are feeling, their communities are feeling in different ways and actually needing more from those nonprofit organizations. And lack of financial planning capacity, 78% struggle with long-term financial sustainability and are thinking about how do we actually create sustainability moving forward. The financial planning crisis. 52% of nonprofits have 3 months or less of operating cash reserves, which is really scary. 18% are reporting they have less than 1 month of cash reserves on hand, which is really scary. Now, it's not super uncommon because a lot of times nonprofits are operating off of reimbursable grants and funding, but it is a scary place to operate from when you don't have kind of a nest egg on the side to make sure you can sustain your operations in the event that something happens. One funding delay, one unexpected expense, or an economic downturn could spell a lot of pain and suffering and a lot of crisis for a lot of the organizations that we work with. Proper financial infrastructure to us equals resiliency and growth. So the foundation is visibility enables better decision making. Organizations can't manage what they can't measure. Real-time financial data can prevent critical situations. You can anticipate them better. And clear metrics inform strategic choices about programs and resources and where you need to invest and where you may need some additional support or funding to keep them going. Resilience is all about predictability and building stability. What that looks like is cash flow forecasting to prevent funding surprises, scenario planning, preparing organizations for multiple possible features, and strong financial controls can maintain stakeholder confidence, which I think really means promoting confidence in your community and those who are supporting your organizations with funding. And last but not least, unlocking capacity to focus on growth. Strategic capacity, if you can build it in your organization, unlocks opportunity to take your organization further. And what that looks like is data-driven insights, identifying high-impact programs, like knowing where to double down. Multi-year financial planning enables a sustainable expansion. You know where you're going 2 to 3 years in advance. And last but not least, and Karen will cover this, professional financial management that can attract larger donors and grants. And I think in this modern world, looking for different types of support and donations, not going back to the well and kind of beating the same drum you've been beating for a very long time. So Sarah Serban is going to talk to us about setting the foundation. So Sarah,
Yeah.
take us away.
Thank you, Matt. So I want to go back to what Matt mentioned before and kind of set two realities here for us. So our first is going to be a situation of a little bit before in financial chaos. So like Matt mentioned, we had clients where before they come to us, there's invoices, all over the place, uncashed checks. Things are just not well organized. And this results in systems and process issues. We see they've got 7 different platforms that don't talk to each other, which results in inefficiencies and potentially inaccurate books. Excel spreadsheets is their accounting system. This can be hard for stakeholders to digest, understand, and then most importantly, make those decisions from. And then also month-old financial reports that you're getting, if you even get them at all. These then can result in day-to-day realities where the executive director is finding themselves doing the bookkeeping, at 11 o'clock at night on the weekend. Grant reporting, is then also requiring that weekend work, or
last minute right before the deadlines are happening. And without systems in place, you're also finding it's hard to put those reports together. This results in a lot of time needing to be spent on managing your financial systems and processes. These issues are even more heightened when you have that finance person who you've solely relied on leave your organization. We see this all the time. A bookkeeper leaves who's been doing your books for 20 plus years, and you might not fully understand what they were doing, and systems just weren't in place to be able to have someone that key leave. Or you have cash flow surprises, like can we even pay payroll this month? And then finally, there's other issues that can really make you hit that breaking point are when you're trying to provide funders or auditors those reports that they need. And again, you just easily can't pull them. Bottom line is that you're spending more time managing financial chaos than even advancing your mission.
And Sarah, on that point, how many times do nonprofit organizations come to us when everything is working perfectly today?
I would say almost never.
It's very common that folks start looking for other solutions when something breaks or somebody leaves. And I don't think spending enough time proactively looking for a solution because you want to raise the bar for how you do this in your organization, which I would consider like making it easier for yourself to do business. Um, so yeah, I mean, it's great when it breaks, but I think, even thinking more proactively, like, man, feels like we should be able to do this better or faster. It should be better technology. Like just kind of picking your head up and looking out in front and thinking about where we want to take the organization next versus waiting until it's too late. Because usually when we get to that point, exactly what Sarah said, it's like, we haven't had financials in 3 months. The board doesn't know how to engage with the executive director. So they're kind of like, they start to suffocate a little bit because they're getting nervous and they're getting anxious. And that can just be really disruptive for the organization.
Yeah, really great cause there, Matt, which leads us to our next slide here, which is that after, which we like to call financial excellence and what we strive for. So same organization, we talked about before, now looking at them today along with our well over 100 nonprofits that we work with, they now have really great real-time visibility through live dashboards that show you exactly what your financial position looks like at any given time. Funds automatically being tracked right at the time that you're making that transaction. So you can quickly pull reports when you need to supply them to your grantors, as well as having a grant balance visibility right at any moment that you need it. This is really helpful for directors. I know a lot of my customers, their directors are responsible for their own grant budgets. So being able to provide them with those reports on a weekly, monthly basis allows them to know, okay, this is how much I have left, and this is where I'm tracking towards my grant, which is very, very useful information. They also then can streamline operations once we get some of these processes in place. This results in one-click, mission-focused board reports. Again, to Matt's point, your board needs to make sure that they're understanding what financials that they're seeing and how the organization is doing. We automate those grant recordings, like I mentioned. No more weekend work. We want you focused on your mission and not having to stress over reports, and we want to be ahead of those deadlines. And then again, systems that can survive that change. Things happen. Bookkeepers, retire, they move on. And we want to make sure that the organization doesn't skip a beat just because someone leaves. With these tools in place and processes, this looks like a strategic leadership team that has an executive director who, again, they can focus on that mission. That's what their true passion is. We want to get them back to spending most of their time doing that. Board meetings that, again, become more strategic. Your board feels comfortable in the reports that they're getting. They start maybe asking questions and not being just complacent with the, month or the lack thereof monthly reports that they're seeing. And then funders that really trust the reports they're getting hopefully then leading to the opportunity to apply for larger grants and larger funding opportunities now that you actually have the systems in place to track all of that, because that can be a very overwhelming part of the process. So the bottom line here is that you're spending time changing the lives of those in your communities and really focusing on that mission than trying to chase down every receipt in all of the financial processes that can be a little chaotic.
And Sarah, while you're flipping to the next slide, I think
Yeah.
that the funders that trust your management and trust your organization is a big one. We've seen this happen many times when organizations aren't organized and they can't produce financial reports and documentation easily. You can start to erode the trust of those supporting you. And once you lose it, it's tough to get it back. And that can really impact your ability to provide the programming to your community that you'd like to. But if you do it really well, if you're Johnny on the spot and you can produce this stuff real time, faster than everybody else, and you make it easy for them to kind of see what you're providing to them, I think that tends to make you more of a preferred organization because they have a high degree of confidence that like, you are putting their money to good use and you're highly disciplined about how you manage it. And that goes a long way, especially as it gets more competitive out there.
Exactly. Exactly. Especially in the markets now. So perfect. Well, our next piece here that we want to talk through is our nonprofit financial clarity framework that we've created. These are actionable resources covering each of these steps that we're going to walk through here more in a second. Built out a complete nonprofit financial resource center. So everyone that's on this webinar, you will be receiving access via email after this session, along with the recording. So don't worry about taking extremely detailed notes. All of this will be sent to you after the fact, so you can have this implementation guide afterwards as well. So now let's dive into what those foundation steps are. Perfect. So with our step number 1, we need to make sure that we're setting up the proper fund separations. So you know exactly what money you can and can't touch. Without the proper account separation and tracking, there's risk of misusing the funds and violating the donor agreements, as well as not having the funds available when now you actually need to spend them. The key here is to first set up 3 main categories and know where your money falls. So first, it's going to be any of your unrestricted funds. So these can be used towards any of your organizational needs and purposes. The second is going to be temporarily restricted. This is when a donor says, hey, I need it to only be spent towards this specific program, or you can use this money, but I only want you to be able to use it within the next 12 months. Whatever that time period might be, there's some sort of a restriction or obligation of use for those funds. And then the last one is going to be anything that's permanently restricted. We often see this with endowments where the large initial endowment portion you really can't spend or move. Sometimes you can have a temporary restricted piece where you can release some of the interest and use that towards a certain mission or purpose. But those are our 3 main categories there that we want to make sure that any funding comes in is properly segregated along the way. So once we have those, we can move on to our step number 2. So step 2 focuses on building out the automated tracking capabilities. So the problem that can arise here without this automation in place, for example, and we talked about it on some of these other, sides as well, is that program director spending their weekends, spending time that, again, could be better used towards advancing the mission on recreating expense reports just to meet a deadline that's maybe tomorrow or it's coming up too soon and you're now recreating everything because throughout the month things were not being tracked. So through our technology offerings and the processes that we've put in place, we've enabled our customers to really improve in this area, and it's such a streamlined process. It's really wonderful. So they're able to tag every expense to a specific grant or its purpose at the time of entry. Right off the bat, someone makes that transaction, it's not a month later, and they're trying to remember what it was for. We set up automated deadline alerts as well and progress tracking. So make sure we're never missing any of those grant reportings. I know if you've got a bunch of grants, they all have their own templates and their own, deadlines as well. So make sure we're not missing any of those. And then also creating those audit ready documentation systems and track which grants are fully funded and running deficits. So, like I mentioned before, if you've got directors or even the executive director, you're trying to track, okay, I have this money. How much do I have left to spend? Where have I spent it down? And what categories of that grant budget do I still need to make sure that I'm meeting what I told my grantor I would spend within? These reports are perfect for those scenarios and provide you with all of that insight. This then results in 85% less time spent on grant reporting and also results in more accurate reports that you're giving out to funders, again, building that trust that you have with them. We can then move on to our step 3 in our process, which is going to be creating those board-ready financial reports. So I also sit on a board. I was the treasurer for the longest time. I am now the board chair. So I fully understand that everyone who comes to a board has different backgrounds, right? Maybe your treasurer is the only one that has that financial insight, and everybody else is really just, they signed up because they love your mission, right? And that's wonderful. That's who we want. We want those teammates on our board. But oftentimes they might not fully understand the financials or at least how they're right now being reported to them. And so that's something we want to make sure that we can change there so they can become more active. Again, problem here is 72% of the nonprofit executive directors say that their board reporting is honestly their biggest stressor. Again, they just don't understand it. It's not being sent to them in a way that's usable at this time. It's if it is being sent, maybe it's sent late. Your board meeting's Wednesday, you're just getting it, and it's not enough time for maybe some people to really digest it. And then again, board members that can't fully, complete that fiduciary responsibility. It's a key part of being part of a board. And I think sometimes can get overlooked if the financials are a bit overwhelming for people. So solution here. Creating those reports and dashboards that your board members can actually access. Again, this real-time live financial systems, so they can have access to those whenever needed. Clear budget versus actual comparisons as well. So we can make sure, again, we're tracking towards that budget that they approved going into the year, and we can call out any of those variances. Also makes it easier for people to spot questions that they might have and have more of a conversation in those board meetings. And then board level financial performance that shows mission impact. And then lastly, some forward-looking cash flow projections, not just historical data, right? We want to see where are we looking every time. Yes, you made a budget, but things change, right? I feel like you approve the budget, a few months later, maybe you get a grant that you didn't expect to get, or some expenses change that you weren't anticipating. So all of that is what we definitely want to make sure is always being automated and available to your board and your leadership team. Resulting in here a shift from why are we over budget? Again, having more of that conversation to how do we actually scale this successful program, which is really our main goal here. So once we've got our first 3 steps in place, we can start leaning in to steps 4 and 5. So this is now really that advanced implementation of these systems. So reality check here. A nonprofit had $500,000 in confirmed grants. That's wonderful. But you couldn't make payroll. How? Well, it's cash flow timing. As you all may know, a lot of times you will get a grant. You might not actually receive the dollars in the door until a few months later. Could take longer with everything that's happening right now. And so that's why we'd really like to implement a 13-week cash flow forecasting. Again, very automated, very much something that is very usable to the leadership team and to the executive directors. This is a rolling 13-week forecast tailored to, your funding patterns. So as things change, we can make sure that it's also reflected in your cash flow report. You can also do scenario planning. Again, cannot always know what's going to happen. So we can plan worst case, best case scenarios here. And then real-time visibility into your cash projections. So you're never just wondering, what are things looking like? And it's unclear. Then we can go into step 5, which is very exciting. So that is going to be setting up your financial infrastructure here. So we talked about all these processes. We talked about these really great tools that we can use. But step 5 here is making sure that you have the software and those tools truly in place to implement everything. So our solution here is going to be systems that truly integrate, right? We mentioned before, you have 7 different systems, but they don't talk to each other. And so that can lead to inaccurate reports, just issues along the way. So we have a 2-phase approach here. Phase 1 is going to be that core infrastructure, getting you into a really great financial system. We love to use QuickBooks, Bill.com for your AP system, and then Gusto is a really great HR solution. So once you have those keys in place, we can move on to phase 2. Phase 2 is going to be that advanced visibility and integration. We have really great partners in a system called Digits. It really allows you to have those live dashboards. And we're going to, be going into this more in future webinars, but really great tools that allow leadership, the board, and everybody to really see live reality of how the organization is doing. So I know that was a lot of information. Again, these are all going to be sent to you after the webinar, but we would like to do a quick little poll. So I know the question that we want to ask is, for our next deep dive session, which topic would be most valuable to you and your team? So now we into cash flow and forecasting, that are 13-week planning and managing unpredictable funding timelines, grant management and compliance, automated tracking, stress-free reporting, and actually getting things done on time, board reporting, so transforming those meetings from interrogations into some strategic sessions there. And then lastly, we could go into fund accounting basics a bit more. So properly setting up restricted versus unrestricted. We touched on it a little bit in this webinar, but really diving more into that. So please complete the poll. Let us know what you'd like to see there. But I'd like to pass it on to Karen. So you can't build reserves or endowments on broken accounting. So Karen's going to show us how this is made possible with a solid foundation.
Thanks, Sarah. Good to see everybody. My name's Karen. I'm the CEO of Infinite Giving. I'm an investment advisor. We love working with Hiline because we're very complementary. So you have all of this accounting. It's like, all right, how do we get our books? How do we get our cash flow? And you're setting up all this structure in the reporting, which is so important. We come in on that growth layer, and there's probably all sorts of people on this call where you're like, growth, what's that like? Who's doing that? And then maybe others like, yes, actually, we have an endowment. We're thinking about this. So ideally, I'm going to take the next 15 minutes and really give something for everyone on how we talk about this journey going, essentially what we call leveling up. So how are we moving from the scarcity mindset to a strategy mindset to ultimately the dream, which is financial sustainability, right? Getting a little bit of breath, really getting to get beyond, all of that burnout that we all feel at some point. Scarcity mindset is where we all start. It sounds like when we looked at some of those earlier polls, there's a good portion of us who are still in it. And that's okay. We've all experienced this. But the goal is, how do we get more nonprofit organizations out of that scarcity mindset? And a lot of that means you have to embrace a strategy, which is what we're talking about today, and then not be afraid to really seek sustainability and understand, all right, if we finally start to get reserves and we start to have money, what do we do with it? How do we steward that thoughtfully? And that's where we come into play. So let's start out by looking at scarcity, right? So this is where we're starting. Scarcity is survival. It is you sitting in a reactive spot all the time. It's always using a default language of, well, we can't afford to. Feels familiar, right? Reluctance to invest in infrastructure or staff. A lot of us experience burnout culture, expecting more with less. And really, we start to avoid strategic risk because we're afraid of fear of failure. And that's a tough place to really sit in and stay in. So we want you to move into strategy because this is the part that we can start to have control over. Let's create some intentionality around this because this is the path to resilience. This is where we can empower you to lead with clarity and confidence. And we ultimately want to help you build a culture of generosity that is not driven by desperation, but by vision because donors feel that desperation. And sometimes there's this weird kind of conflict and tension where we're like, no, scarcity mindset, that's noble. I think the desire behind that is noble. But if we really want to be able to continue to show up for the people and the communities that we love and serve, we have to build sustainability and move along that path and get out of that scarcity mindset. So I actually believe that it's a fallacy. It's not noble to live in scarcity mindset. The work you are doing is already noble. So let's make sure that we're stewarding it as well as we can and with a lot of intention because ultimately that strategy is what is going to bring the sustainability that we all seek. So it's enough for us to say it, but I'm going to show you 3 different stats to help me convince you on why this is so important. So the first one was done by the US Trust Study of High Net Worth Philanthropy. And they found that 69% of major donors say they're more likely to give to nonprofits that demonstrate strong leadership and clear financial strategy. Another study done by Dr. Russell James, he's over at Texas Tech. He's done a lot of great research for all of us in the nonprofit industry. He found that perceived financial health significantly increases donor trust and generosity, particularly among high capacity donors. And then finally, the last one, you're starting to see a pattern here, right? The Fundraising Effectiveness Project found that donor retention is consistently higher among organizations that show stability, transparency, and a long-term plan. So this is what donors are saying that they want to see from you. So this is where we have to move that down that path because donors ultimately want to invest in a vision, a strong one, a strategic one, and a sustainable one. And that sustainability, that's our readiness. And I want to be really clear that nonprofits, right? We are different. It's donor money. We have to steward it really well. We're not talking about excess for the sake of excess. We're talking about having enough and stewarding it with intention. And what does enough mean? It's going to be a little bit different for everybody. But as a general rule, enough means we can serve our communities with excellence. Enough means we can grow without fear. And enough means we can say yes to the opportunities that align with your mission when those opportunities happen, which they will. And that's what donors want to be a part of. That's the story that we are telling. So just remember as we talk about this, that these reserves and investments are what protect your people and programs. It's about continuity for showing up. So we can't fear having margin as a bad thing. It's something we have to pursue. We have to pursue a healthy margin so that we can be eventually financially sustainable. So we also have a sustainability framework. It works really nicely with what Hiline does. We kind of think about it as 3 legs to a stool, and that's cash reserve management. So whether you're just starting to build it, you have 1 month, 3 months, 12 months, right? What are we doing with it? How are we thinking about our cash reserves? Then we have endowments and other longer term investing. And the third and final leg of that stool is new pathways of giving. So if you think about what kind of donations are we bringing in, how are we managing those donations, and how are we growing those donations? And this is how we want to help you scale generosity into that sustainability, which is structured, strategic, and secure. So that first leg of the stool is cash management. This has a little bit of a difference with what Hiline does when we're talking about operating cash flow, right? So we are talking as investment advisors, we're talking about your reserve funds. So ideally, those are funds that are built outside of your operating cash flow. Then we often get asked, well, how much is enough? And how much is too much? And how do we know the difference, right? As a general guideline, and again, everybody's different. There's a lot of right paths here. Pre-COVID, you would hear 3 to 6 months of operational reserves. Post-COVID, 6 to 12 months is a bit more standard. I think we've seen that shift because a lot of us have felt it, right? We were like, oh, this is why we have reserve funds. And another way to think about it is ideally for your household, you're having a savings, right? Ideally, in our own homes, we want to have a savings account because what if somebody loses a job? What if there's a great opportunity where we want to embrace that? We want to have a buffer of funds so that we can still provide for our families. That same general principle applies for cash management for your reserve fund. So it is the idea of being responsible and making sure, what if that grant doesn't come through? What if the donor who gives every year didn't give? What if something unexpected happens? If you've not built a reserve fund, then that one event can throw your whole budget and put you in a scarcity mindset really quickly. Whereas if you say, no, we have a 6-month reserve fund, here's where it is, it's designated, here's how we're stewarding it. And then when you need it, you go pull from it. But then as soon as you pull from it, you and your board have a plan where you can replace that back. So 6 month of reserves is a good goal, anywhere between 6 to 12 months. We all start at zero. So even if you're creating a budget, it's like, man, how can we maybe add 1 month this year? Or if we are doing a big capital campaign, can we buffer a little bit so we can build a healthy reserve fund? There's lots of ways to back into that. If you have a building, you're going to need building repairs. So we also then usually suggest, well, let's think about capital expenses and maintenance expenses. So having these reserve funds and being strategic in planning for them. The last little piece of cash management is please do not leave your cash reserves in your checking account or your savings account. We highly recommend bucketing those funds and putting them outside of your bank accounts. And so for us, we often have organizations who have multiple brokerage accounts and we name them. This is your 6-month operational reserve fund. This is your capital campaign. This is grant XYZ that you have the next 24 months to buy down. And then naming them actually helps keep your balance sheets and the reporting that Hiline's doing also very clear and transparent for the accounts. And then when you're pulling money in and out, it makes it really clean. And then we can also have different strategies on the investment side, right? Like your money market in your bank is probably maybe 1.5%. Our money market is 4.22. There's a lot of different ways where you can even target with fixed income and treasury portfolios between 4 and 6% in this market and a conservative holding. So let's make sure that no matter what it is, we're stewarding it really well and stewarding it with intention. Once you've built a healthy cash reserve, that moves us to the second leg of the stool, which is more endowments and investments. Sometimes we get organizations who I serve on a higher ed board where we have a very small $2 billion endowment, which is small in higher ed. I also serve on boards where, we are still trying to build up a 6-month reserve fund. If you do not have a healthy reserve fund, you do not want to set up an endowment. But endowments are really important because for some organizations, they can be a really key cornerstone for financial sustainability. And what I get really passionate about is that I want small to mid-sized organizations to have more endowments. And because so much about what our donors do and where they give is towards endowments. There are a reason why Harvard has a $53 billion endowment. And a lot of hospitals have billion-dollar endowments. And yes, that's B, right? A billion-dollar endowment. But what if we could take a lot of those types of donor gifts who want to give a legacy gift and move that into small to mid-sized organizations? That's what's really exciting because donors want to give that way. So they're going to the organizations who can take a legacy gift, a gift that they give one time that can live for generations to come. So there are ways that you can actually create endowments that give small to mid-sized organizations a lot more flexibility. Micro endowments, quasi endowments like a board restricted endowment, unrestricted term endowments. So there's a lot of flexibility these days in making endowments more accessible and approachable for organizations who are a bit smaller, but who are ready to start to think longer term. And again, it's just really important because endowments can build sustainability and legacy in that fundraising. And generous donors want to give to endowments. So we want to give more nonprofit organizations the infrastructure to be able to say, actually, yes, we can take that gift. And here's ways that we already have the infrastructure in planning. So again, you have cash management. Let's steward what we have well and with intention. Endowments, right? Not for everybody, but they're not as unaccessible as you think. There's a lot of great ways to do that. $1 million endowment can give $50,000 a year in a disbursement every year for decades and decades to come. That's sustainability. That's something that you're not fundraising for, right? The third and final leg of that stool is talking about other ways and new pathways of giving. I'm sure you've heard this. Maybe you're doing it. Maybe it's like on the to-do list, or maybe you're like, we've tried it. It doesn't really work. But we want to talk to you as the last little piece is just these giving trends between stock, crypto, DApps, and then as we just talked about, endowment gifts, because only asking for cash donations sometimes unintentionally limits generosity. And we want to be really careful about that. And we don't always frame it that way to ourselves. And here's why you want to think about that is you have to remember that more than 90% of donor wealth in the US is held in assets like securities and stocks, not cash. Yet in philanthropy, the majority of us are only asking for cash gifts. So you're asking from the very smallest bucket that those high capacity donors have. And it's the least tax efficient. And so when we ask and we're pursuing major gifts, we want to make sure we're asking from the largest bucket because that's where those gifts come from. So the average online cash gift is $128. Probably feels right, right? But gifts of assets, while less common, right? So credit, debit, we got to lead with that. Check writing, it all still happens. But the gift of assets tend to be much, much bigger. And here's a few numbers to throw at you. The average stock gift is $8,000. The average crypto gift is $10,000. The average donor advised fund grant is $12,000. And the average endowment gifts are $25K plus. And so all of a sudden, it starts to move the needle. Do you know how many donors you would have to have who gave the average $128 cash gift versus one stock gift? You'd have to have 62 donors to give an online cash gift to equal one stock donor when you're doing that math, right? You don't want to take yourself out of that option. And what we've also seen just as far as giving trends is that stock giving has actually risen 136% in the last 8 years. We process tens of millions of dollars of stock gifts for our clients every year. More and more grants are coming through as securities. More donors are giving huge variables, $2 million stock gifts, $2,500 stock gifts. So it goes across the gamut. But one of the reasons is that stocks and crypto are actually one of the most tax efficient ways to give. So when donors are looking at that 90% of wealth not sitting in cash, they are thinking about their tax efficiency because they can save up to 37% in capital gains taxes when they can give it to you as a security. Now, some of you guys are going to say, well, we don't get a lot of stock gifts. Yes, someone opened a brokerage account somewhere and we don't really know, but we don't get it. I'm like, great. It's the chicken and the egg problem. Are you talking about it? Are you reminding donors with every call to action? Are you reminding them, hey, there's really tax efficient ways you can give in stock, you can give in crypto, can you give from your donor advised fund? Please do not do a campaign where you are only asking for credit card donations because that is the average of $120. When you want to start to move into big gifts, these types of conversations are what's most helpful. So what I'm going to leave you with is this research from Dr. Russell James again. He did a study of over 1 million nonprofits, and he found that those who pursued stock gifts in addition to cash increased contributions by 55% over a 5-year period. So when you think about that, imagine doubling your budget in 5 years simply by making the donation of assets a greater priority. So when you look at this big framework of all of the different accounting structure that Hiline is doing, and then with Infinite Giving, how we're looking at these different ways, again, we're a fiduciary partner. We are a registered investment advisor. I am a former executive director of a nonprofit. I serve on boards. Like, we understand what you're doing. And so we want to grow with you. And that's kind of what we look at as great. How can we receive donations and make these really complex donations much easier and more likely for your donors to give and for you to receive? How do we thoughtfully manage your cash reserves? How do we get it out of the bank and actually really thoughtfully steward it in a way where it's bucketed and it protects and starts to build sustainability. And then, of course, the last one, how do we conservatively invest and grow? As you move into that long-term growth, we can help you create endowments. We do all of your policy creation, all of your board reporting, all of that. So we're just one more tool in your toolkit to help you grow. And I hope that this small piece of the presentation has been inspiring and allowed you to take a step back and be like, all right, how do we move from scarcity to strategy to ultimately sustainability?
So incredible, Karen. I think the Hiline loves infinite giving because we're passionate about modernizing financial operations and accounting operations for nonprofits. And it takes good technology and systems to be able to do it. It's like how do you do it? You can't just do it. Like you got to have the right systems to do it. We love infinite giving because it takes it one step farther, and it's great technology and a great platform to help you figure out how do I actually move into the world where we're going to start thinking about financial management, fundraising through a modern lens, because this is inevitably what I think the next generation of donors and supporting folks in communities are going to be looking for. So, Katie Burns, you want to talk to us about what it looks like when we put it all together?
Yes, let's do it. Okay, so Sarah showed you the foundation, and then Karen showed you the growth opportunities on top of that. But these are not separate initiatives, they're interconnected systems that amplify each other. And to show that, we're going to talk about Penny's Wildlife Rescue, which looked a lot like those disheveled kind of organizations, crumpled up receipts that we were talking about at the beginning of today's session. In addition, they had 400K sitting in a savings account that was barely generating any income and no long-term security plan or sustainability, as Karen was discussing. And when you think about putting together everything we talked about today, Penny's Wildlife Rescue with the foundation and all of the things that Infinite Giving does, you can see the non-cash giving, taking on their first stop gift, cash management using cash flow forecasting, and an endowment strategy. They could save 65K in annual additional revenue from the same donor base that they had before, just by implementing the steps that we talked through today.
It's crazy because when you think about them, like the major pain point of so many nonprofit leaders is like, how do we get more money? Right? It's all about finance. Like we need more donations so we can have more impact. Yet so much of it is, well, how do we steward and plan around what we already have? And there are often ways to do it with more intentionality that can help create more of those donations simply by managing what they already have a little bit differently.
So true. Okay, so when we had everybody sign up for the webinar, we wanted to hear directly from all of you about what was top of mind right now when it came to your finances. So the chart up here is showing the most common challenges nonprofit leaders shared with us when registering for today's session. And not surprisingly, fundraising tops the list. And that is where Infinite Giving brings huge value to all of the nonprofits that they serve. And just behind that, those next three challenges are ones that highlight that we solve every day for our nonprofit customers: building better systems, managing cash, and making sure your budget actually helps you lead.
And that is Penny, by the way, our team mascot, the squirrel Penny.
I like
Who also has a wildlife rescue. Okay, so the difference between nonprofits that survive and those that thrive isn't the size of their mission. It is the strength of their financial foundation and their willingness to build on it strategically. And that is what we are here to help you create using the foundation from Hiline and the revenue unlock at Infinite Giving, which can help you build your legacy with whatever mission you are there to serve. So feel free to drop any questions into the chat that you have. I know we got a couple, and I do want to have our panelists today answer those out loud just so everybody can hear them. But also, just really quickly here, we wanted to do a little plug for our next webinar that we are going to be doing with our friends over at Digits. As we're the first AGL certified firm that is using their software, really excited about that.
Yeah, Digits is a great tool. I mean, our job, we talk about technology. Technology is a huge enabler for making it easier to do business inside your organization. And we spent a couple of years working with Digits on what is essentially a QuickBooks competitor, but it's a really cool platform. Gives a lot deeper insights and visibility to the finances of your business, much better reporting and dashboards. Digits is what all of our customers get. We are giving dashboards on top of QuickBooks right now, but they do have a competing general ledger product that we're really excited about. So we're going to dive into that a little bit in the next session. So hopefully if you came today, you'll join us again for that session as well. Dive into Q&A. It's Q&A
Yeah.
time.
Let's do the Q&A. I do want to have Sarah, maybe you can just do a voiceover of two of the questions that we had in the chat. One of them is about accounting systems and the other is about how Gusto allows for staff allocation across different programs and grants. I think both of those would be great for the here.
Yeah. So Gusto is a really great tool. A lot of my nonprofits use it. It's really great for that grant process. So you can, let's say you have an employee and 50% or 100% of their salary is linked to a specific grant or specific program. You're able to designate that within Gusto, and then it will map over specifically like some other softwares as well, but we really see great use with QuickBooks Online. Syncs right over, leads to easier grant reporting that we can run. All that information comes right into your financial system. So it's a really, really great tool to use.
Awesome. And then Matt, do you want to explain why 13 weeks is kind of the gold standard for cash flow forecasting?
Yeah. I want to just add a little something first to the question Sarah just responded to. And so again, technology, it's going to be like a theme. You hear us talk about technology a lot. Gusto is a great platform. It's easy to use. It's got the right integrations. They've been thoughtful about how they build it. And we're generally introducing that to our nonprofit organizations. Like many of the other tools that we use, there are some very big legacy payroll companies out there. I'm not going to name them by names to keep this from being controversial. One starts with a P and one starts with an A. They seem to have a little bit of a monopoly on the nonprofit space, but we generally find they are not the easiest platforms or the best platforms to serve their needs. So Gusto is a great tool to kind of just streamline your financial operations and streamline your grant and program level reporting.
We use Gusto too. We love it. It's great.
Gusto is great. So on 13-week cash flow, why 13 weeks? 13 weeks is because it's a quarter. I would bucket planning into two categories. There's long-term planning, which can be an annual budget or a multi-year financial plan. And then there's short-term forecasting, which generally we think about that as cash flow forecasting or cash flow planning. A quarter is just long enough that it gives you a reasonable purview to the future. You can get tactical. You can make decisions on who am I going to pay? What do I have coming in terms of cash from some of my grant vouchering efforts for fundraising? You can get hyper tactical and it helps you kind of just navigate short periods where there may be some compression. A quarter is, or 13-week cash flow is kind of like the CFO's favorite tool. I mean, it's like the thing they're in and looking at every single day. We didn't create it. I wish that we had invented the concept, but 13 weeks is intended to be one quarter at a time. And you keep it rolling every week. So you're always looking out 13 weeks in advance.
Even when we do short-term cash management, we do a lot of like, oh, let's do a rolling 91 day, like treasury bill, or how do we think about short-term? We think of it in that way too.
Yep. Because you may need access to it. So you want to make sure that you've got the liquidity needs to meet the demand of the next 3 months.
Right.
Yeah.
Why there are better options than laddered CDs.
Yes.
Okay, another question on Gusto. Does Gusto handle time tracking? Yes, it does. And then I see too that David had a follow-up question on his time tracking question about splitting 50-50% of time of somebody's comp or their time tracking towards two different programs. Sarah, you can do that, correct?
Yeah. So you can set it up a few different ways in Gusto. If it's an hourly employee, they could be tracking two different jobs. So each program would be a job. You can stake it over that way. We also have systems in place where if it does need to get allocated, we can do that with journal entries right in your financial system. We have a really great workbook that we help break those out with.
Awesome. Okay, and we did have so many pre-submitted Q&A questions, so I'm going to
We have a good one. Brent just posted a good one too that we should take.
see.
The question was, I have an
Okay.
understanding of the technology at Hiline. My question is, does Hiline do the org accounting and bookkeeping or just help set up the systems to manage it? We do both. So if you engage with Hiline, so we are in the business of outsourced financial operations. We do the entire thing end to end. We take care of all the bookkeeping, all of your accounts payable management. We take care of 13-week cash flow planning, budget and forecasting. We take care of HR operations and payroll. We also support on things like doing your grant reporting, doing your grant vouchering. We take care of facilitating your third-party financial statement audit and your 990 preparation. So we really try to cover everything that would fall into the office of the CFO for small to medium-sized businesses and nonprofits being the favorite industry that we work in. So we do it all.
We do that too, where we have our modern technology platform. We also have services. So we're still your fiduciary partner. We help you with, short-term, midterm, long-term strategic planning. We do all of that as well, but we have an award-winning platform too. I think most nonprofit service providers like us who want to see you succeed know that you have to do a little bit of both.
Yeah, I think this isn't just for nonprofits, but it's for the world. Like services and technology are being stitched closer and closer together. So if we're going to take on the services for your organization, we take on the responsibility of doing all the procurement, implementation, setup, design and controls, and everything that goes with making sure that it gets set up the right way so it can run. I think it's really tough to separate technology and services anymore. It really just takes somebody to help navigate you through the process. And we take an approach where we are looking for the best stack of software and technology to make that run even better. That's how Hiline and Infinite Giving found each other. Is we're constantly trying to make sure that we've got a technology stack and a suite of offerings that is going to cover as much of the finance side of your organization as possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Should we do one more question, Karen? There's one here about learning about stock donations. How does it work afterwards when stock gets sold?
So we are on our platform, we are open your brokerage account really quickly and easily. It takes 30 minutes of your time to get onboarded. And then we get it on your website. So you can do an embeddable option, a landing page, and everything's customized to you. So we provide, again, the technology, but also the advisory services. So we handle all of the D2C information. We process the gift, liquidate it automatically, do all the branded donation receipting for you. And then at the end, you can either direct your funds into your bank account or into an Infinite Giving account. So it's up to you. But the idea is, especially if you've received a stock gift, sometimes it's so hard to open a brokerage account. So I'm like, ours is the only online brokerage account opening that exists in the US for nonprofits. So we make that really easy. And then again, the liquidation, all the administrative process. If you've received a stock gift, you may have also had that moment where you're like, no one checked the brokerage account and we didn't know something was going, or, oh, well, that donor gave, but they didn't tell us it was giving. And now something hit our account and we don't know who it's from. We solve all of that. So we are able to connect your name to that. We do the automatic liquidation, the branded donation receipting. And then what gets really fun with our technology is that, say you have a capital campaign going, you receive a stock gift. That stock gift is meant for the capital campaign. We go from your website, the designation, we liquidate it, and then automatically reinvest it into the capital campaign where we are stewarding those funds wisely. And so we're also handling the money movement side. So we're automatically allocating that donation into the proper account if we're managing that. So the idea is it's a set and go. We handle all the administrative side of it and you just get to build relationships.
Awesome. Thanks, Karen.
Yeah.
And thanks to all of you for joining us today. That was an incredible hour spent talking about nonprofits and all of the things Hiline and Infinite Giving can do for the great people in the nonprofit space.
Yeah, thank you again for joining and your interest in kind of what we have to say and what we're doing in the space. Keep doing good in the world. Keep focused on your mission. And if anybody has any interest or wants to learn more about Hiline and Infinite Giving, you should have the ability to contract us down coming out of the presentation.
Absolutely. And if no one has told you all thank you yet, or it's been a while, thank you for the important work you're doing. It's greatly appreciated.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hopefully see you all at the next webinar.